the sake of love. That's the ultimate reason. I mean, in order to fight any desire, you need a greater desire. Holiness is not about being numb to the beauties that God has created. It's just learning to live a full-blooded chastity of yes, I recognize the beauty of human sexuality.
Berufen zur Liebe, der Podcast über die Theologie des Leibes.
Jason, thank you for being here with us. It's so great to have you here. So, can you present yourself, shortly, maybe?
Introduce myself?
Yes.
So my name is Jason Evert. I run a ministry called Chastity Project. We run a website called chastity.com, and I've written a number of books on the subject of human sexuality and God's plan for love. Travel around the world for the past 26 years, speaking on the subject at high schools, universities, young adult communities, and so covering the whole gamut of subjects from abstinence before marriage to breaking free from pornography, how to prepare for marriage, healing if you need to start over from wounds from the past, modesty, theology of the body, gender, birth control, hot topics, sexual ethic, subjects that Catholics and non-Catholics alike sometimes wrestle with. Why does the church teach this and that? And so we try to approach it from a perspective not simply of what's true and good, but especially what's beautiful. And I think if we can show the beauty of God's plan for human sexuality, then its counterfeit, which is lust, tends to look a bit boring.
Yeah, true. So today we want to talk about a book written by you and Matt Fradd. It's called Forged. So what can we expect from this book?
Well, the reason we created this is because so many young guys came up to us and say, look, I get it. Porn's bad. I don't need an argument about that. But just because I know it's bad doesn't mean I know how to break free from this thing. So what should I do? And because they'll say, look, I'll break free for 3 weeks or a month and I'm good. And then I mess it up again. And then I'm good for 3 weeks or 2 months. And then I get bored or lonely or angry or stressed out or tired. And I just fall back to the same old habits. And this has been going on for years. How do I finally break free once and for all? And so I would say, well, try installing this app and use this filtering thing and get some accountability and go to confession and try this and that. But I felt like we were kind of just piecing together different pieces of this. So I reached out to Matt Fradd, a longtime friend of mine, and he had written extensively on the subject. And I said, hey, what do you think about just getting together and kind of creating a one-stop resource that would really approach this from a really human perspective? What I mean by that is a lot of times this issue is addressed simply from a spiritual perspective. Well, you just need to go to the confession and pray more rosaries and read more liturgy of the hours and do your Bible, and it's just all spiritual. And that is a part of it, but that's not the whole thing. And other times it's no, theology. They need to understand God's plan for sexuality. So let's teach the theology of the body. Okay, that's intellectual, it's important, it's theology, but that's just part of it. There's also the dimension of psychology, of emotions, of trauma, of attachment, of addiction, how to deal with that. There's also physiological aspects, am I getting enough exercise, enough sleep? Am I eating healthy? We need to approach this from a truly human perspective of our body, our minds, our hearts, our souls, because if we just camp out on one area, I don't think it's going to be enough to break some of these addictions. And so we really try to approach it from a compassionate perspective, to have kind of mercy on yourself, of understanding where is all this coming from, but then understanding, full well that the goal isn't to be addicted to this stuff for the rest of your life. No one wants to be some 30-year-old porn-addicted dad who's kind of got to slap his laptop shut when his 5-year-old girl comes in the room because she can't look at what dad's looking at. It's just not who we want to be. But like I said, just because we know what we want doesn't mean we know how to get there. And so the purpose of the book was a 33-day kind of spiritual exercise or plan where every day we're hitting on a different aspect, almost like giving them a different weapon or tool that they could use down the road to kind of slay this Goliath and battle these temptations. So really trying to look at it from all these perspectives of psychological, theological, philosophical, and I think if we take that well-rounded approach, we're likely to see more fruit from the efforts to break free.
Well, fighting addictions sounds like a real challenge. Why is it worth starting?
Well, it's for the sake of love. That's the ultimate reason. I mean, in order to fight any desire, you need a greater desire. And all guys have the capacity to stop looking at porn whenever they want. Even the most completely addicted person who's like hasn't gone a minute without it. I met one guy and he said, yeah, when I get home on the weekends, I watch 12 hours of pornography on Saturday. Then I go to bed and I watch 12 hours of pornography on Sunday and then go back to school on Monday. He said, I don't even enjoy it anymore, but I don't know how to live without it. And it's like even that guy could say no any moment. And the reason I say that is because imagine if there was some girl he was really interested in and he's sitting in the library at school and he notices out of the corner of the eye that she's walking by. And in about 5 seconds, she's going to see what he's looking at on his phone. You know how easy it would be from just a swipe to a different screen? Like, oh, now I'm studying about pediatric medicine. And like, wait a minute, where did he all of a sudden lose interest in like naked supermodels and to pretend like he's a man? It's because he wants to be seen as one and he knows that this isn't manly. And so the question is not, do we have the capacity to say no? The question is, do we have the motivation to say no? Because when the motivation's there, we have 100% self-mastery. But the question is, the motivation is just not there because like now there is no one around and it's 10 o'clock at night and I've had a long day and I'm bored and I'm kind of angry and stressed out and I can't fall asleep and I've got my cell phone on me. Like, what is there to motivate me at that point? Not to start scrolling on TikTok and Snapchat and worse apps even than that. We need a deeper motivation. And I think the motivation of love is the only thing that can really impel you of like, okay, if I want to really love a woman one day, when am I going to get rid of this stuff? Because it's not like I can transition from using women hours a day to sudden authentic love. If I can just trash this stuff now, I'm being faithful to my bride before I even lay eyes upon her. And so I think we've got to try to motivate guys for the sake of love to get rid of this counterfeit so they can love as they were created to, because nothing else is really going to satisfy.
Well, I printed today the cover because the book isn't printed so far.
Okay.
It's very similar to the English version.
Okay.
And you can see it's a sword.
Yeah.
So from the cover or a glance at the table of contents, the analogy with the sword, the iron, is obvious. Why exactly this analogy?
Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons. I mean, the book of Proverbs tells us that iron sharpens iron, and so too the just man, meaning when you got other guys around you that are living lives of virtue, you sharpen each other, you become better men. And so that is a part of the book of accountability. We don't want you doing the book by yourself. We want you doing it with another guy. And when you join the program, there's free videos you're going to get every single day that are only about 4 or 5 minutes long that correspond to that day's topic to kind of take you deeper into it. And so it's not some 150-page book you got to read at once. It's just a little bit a day, but we're accompanying you kind of like iron sharpens iron. But then the more important analogy there is steel, when it's actually turned into a sword, in order for it to become malleable, the blacksmith needs to heat it up to about 2,000 degrees in order for it to be shaped. And then he's got to pound on that thing on an anvil and then polish it and grind it down. And in the process of the forging of the metal, it actually becomes stronger. It changes the crystal structure on a microscopic level, making the steel useful and more strong and more shiny and sharp. And so what we're trying to do in this program is kind of put you in a furnace. We're really going to challenge you of like, okay, now let's really look at the roots of this stuff. Like, where is this coming from? Like, let's soften it up a bit, not to just heap guilt and shame upon you, but to have a little bit of compassion in your own story of addiction. Like, where did this come from? You know, man, I just stumbled on it when I was 8 or 10 years old and I didn't even know what I was looking at, but then I was captivated and drawn in. And before I knew it, I couldn't stop looking at the stuff. Like, okay, well, let's go into that story and perhaps start to find some healing there. Because if we're just dealing with the symptoms here, it's almost like that's the fruit, but there's kind of roots that go way below that. And if we don't disturb that root system and meet some of those unmet needs, then it's like just cutting the leaves off of a weed. It's just a matter of time before it sprouts again. And so that image of the sword kind of indicates the approach we're going to try to take to turn them from some raw piece of metal that may be rusty and feeling useless to something that really is a weapon for our culture to build up a civilization of love.
Yeah, that's great. Really great. So this book is for men. Have you any recommendations for women? Because it's not only a man problem.
Oh, no, this is very true. We actually have another book, very similar in length to it, by a woman named Kelsey Skoke. And her book is called Uncompromising Purity. It's not just a guy problem. And we published that because nobody's talking about this. And it's a huge issue. And she herself was at a conference once where they had a men's session and the women's session. After the session, she talked to one of the guys. Well, what did you guys talk about? And they're like, oh, we talked about porn and masturbation. And he's like, well, what did you guys talk about? She's like emotions and modesty. And she just thought like, I need to be in that group, not this one. And so she went to the leaders of this conference and said like, why don't we have a workshop for the guys, for the girls on the same topic of porn and masturbation? And the leader was like, okay, well, why don't you do the talk? And she's like, okay, I will. And so the next year, she gave the presentation to the women on that subject. And man, she got just bombarded afterwards with women saying, thank you for speaking up. I thought I was the only one. All these girls saying the same thing. Like, my goodness, there's this cultural stereotype that men have sexual temptations and women have emotional problems. It's like, no. This is a real addiction. And sometimes the motivations are different and the solutions are different. But lust is a human problem, not a guy problem. One of the women even said, like, she thought that she wasn't even sinning in a feminine way because she was so accustomed to think that's a guy issue. So we've got to remove that stigma because it sends the women into this spiral of shame and isolation that's completely unnecessary. And so if women can understand, hey, you're not the only one, but it isn't going to satisfy you. It's almost like standing outside of a restaurant hungry, looking at the window, the food through the window, thinking you're going to get fed. It just makes you hungrier. It doesn't really satisfy. And so her book, we highly recommend, Uncompromising Purity. And you could find it, at least in English, at chastity.com.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
And if I may add, it's already translated into German and hopefully will be published in 2024. So
great.
Yeah, totally. Well, you already said that the book has 33 chapters, so every day a chapter. Why exactly 33 days?
Well, one, it needed to be sufficient that, we're really covering this from enough angles without being overwhelming. It's also in honor of the 33 years of our Lord's life here on earth, and, how much time, he was given in this earth. So, there's some symbolism behind it, but you can't treat it too quickly. Like, okay, here's 7 lessons and you're free from porn. But then you don't want to go too much. Okay, here's 145 things you got to do, because it just gets overwhelming. So it's a manageable piece of time. Like, okay, I could do this for a month. I can handle 33 days. And we wanted to make sure that it didn't feel too intimidating, because people who wrestle with this area typically are very prone to despair, in the sense of, I've been trying and I keep messing up. What's the point of going to confession again? I've already confessed this 500 times. What is 501 going to do? And so they're so prone, I think, the devil wants to tempt them to despair and disappointment in themselves, thinking like it's always going to be this hard. But it's almost like if you have 2 magnets close together and you start separating them, it's really hard. But then as they get further away, it's like, okay, this is doable. And so during the early phases of trying to break free, the devil's going to want to make you think it's always going to be this hard for the rest of your life. And he's going to especially pour in that discouragement when you're really about to make some breakthroughs. And so you've got to make sure that you're not losing your peace when you fall, but get up, start over, because the virtue of the Blessed Trinity is dwelling in you by virtue of your baptism. So you've got what it takes. And yeah, you might need some backup. You might need counseling. You might need support, spiritual direction, but you can do this.
And you already mentioned the videos. How did you find speaker for every day?
Well, I kind of looked at the topics that we had covered, and we kind of made a game plan looking at it from psychology and spirituality and theology. And then I thought, okay, well, who's the best guy that I could find to talk about this subject? And then we'd reach out to him, and like virtually everybody said yes. And like these were some experts that I had never even contacted through the ministry before. One well-known spiritual writer, Father Jacques Philippe, who's wrote a lot of beautiful spiritual books. And I wrote it to him, could you, you wrote that book for, searching for and maintaining peace. Could you maybe do a little 5-minute video on how to maintain your peace after you fall? And he graciously agreed to do so in French. And we had a translator with him translate the thing. And so We just wanted to find like the experts of each particular topic to just give their little 4-minute rant on that subject. On one of the videos, I think it's either day 4 or day 8, we have a whole video of just young adult single women talking about how awesome they think these guys are for doing this program, because guys need that encouragement. We do, of just women saying, hey, the fight that you guys are doing is noble. You guys are a cut above by virtue of the fact you're even willing to like stare this beast in the face and try to take it down. And so to kind of have that encouragement from women, because I think there's a lot of like man hating and toxic masculinity talk, and to have some beautiful women saying, hey, you know, guys, we're proud of you. We're praying for you. You've got this. We just try to build up the guys in all these different videos in different ways. So you'll have priests and nuns, you'll have husbands and fathers, single women, psychologists, spiritual directors, theologians. We're just trying to hit it from all these different perspectives.
Yeah, and it's a great mix, actually. I really enjoyed it. And I'm not a guy.
Yeah.
But so which of these chapters is personally for you the most important? Can you say that?
One of the ones I really enjoyed was actually he was the one who was not Catholic. His name was Jay Stringer. He's an evangelical pastor and counselor. And this guy, for his master's thesis, for his research, studied 4,000 people on their internet sexual addictions and kind of looked up, what are you guys looking at online? And then tell me about your life. And he was able to discover these templates of addiction that if you're looking at this genre of porn, of younger women, older women, women being humiliated, you know, women dominating, you dominating a woman, all these different genres, he found that these people tended to fall into these little templates or funnels of whether it's trauma or a very authoritarian, rigid household, or being humiliated by women or seeing abuse. And he was really able to discover, like, wow, a lot of the people searching out this stuff have this story, have this trauma, and they're living out of this wound without even realizing it. And what he talked about is that you will make so much more progress in winning this thing if you have compassion on yourself instead of just white knuckling it and trying to come up with sin management techniques. And so I really like the compassionate approach he took of like, okay, let's just take a moment to learn your story. Like, not just what the triggers are. I'm bored, I'm lonely, I'm angry, I'm stressed, I'm tired, but what the root system might be to this entire addiction. You know, attachment disorders within your own family. Like, what was going on in your life when this addiction started to surface? Because the emotional age at which we begin our addictions is typically the emotional age at which we remain. And so if I become an alcoholic at the age of 15, I could be 35, but emotionally kind of still 15. That when I get stressed out, I just go back to the beer instead of getting stressed out and finding mature ways to cope with life's difficulties. And so as a counselor and a psychologist, he does an awesome job of really kind of peeling off some of these layers of shame and guilt. I remember reading of one evangelical Christians, one guy was not living a good life. I mean, prostitution and cheating on his wife and porn and everything. And he finally opened up to another Christian guy. And the other Christian guy said, well, if what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, then go ahead and do it. And the guy was kind of taken aback. He was like, well, he knew this guy was a good Christian man, but he's just like saying, give grain. And he said, what? And he said, no, if what you really want to do is look at porn and masturbate, then go ahead and do it. And the guy kind of pounded on the desk. He's like, no, that's not what I really want. And the guy looked at him. He's like, exactly. And for him, it was this watershed moment of maybe I'm not completely depraved. Like maybe there's still some good in me. This deep current running underneath all this lust that aches for authentic love, but it just settled for this as a counterfeit. And so I think there's so many insights that we can gain in regards to how we might find a solution by having compassion on ourselves to look at our own desires or addictions or fetishes as almost like a roadmap towards our healing, not in the sense of indulging in it to cure the problem, but like, hey, why am I questing? Why am I thirsting for this thing so much? Why is it so consistently coming up? There's probably a legitimate unmet need or trauma that has not been addressed.
Well, in the first video, you also say that as soon as the book comes out, you will do the program with your son. As this was 2019, I guess you already did the program at least once.
Oh, yeah.
So what was or maybe is your experience?
Yeah, we were the first people ever to do it because I don't want to just write some book and say, "I'll go do that thing." So as soon as we had the PDF approved, it wasn't even printed yet. We just started going through it together as father and son, and that was kind of the idea of not going Lone Ranger on this, because that's what so many guys do. I've had guys tell me, "Look, I've tried everything in the world to break free from this, and you're the first person I've ever told." It's like, well, if I'm the first person you've opened up to about this, clearly you haven't tried everything, because accountability is probably the most important thing. And so each day my son would just kind of sit in his room, and we would just go through and we'd read the things, we'd watch the videos together. And I think it's really important for fathers to do with their teenage sons, not because like, here, boy, let me show you how this is done, but like, no, we're in the trenches on this together. It's not like you have to battle temptations, but I'm a grown up, so I don't have those anymore. It's like, no. You're going to get this stuff till you're dead. Okay. And so we've got to find ways to manage this. I just had on my podcast this last week a Norwegian bishop and monk who wrote a book on chastity recently. And he told a story that I loved on the podcast. He told two that really stuck out to me. And I went back and I listened to the podcast again because it was so rich. One of the things that he said is that in the early desert tradition of the monastic life, there was a story of a young monk who was really afflicted with a lot of temptations and thoughts and struggles and fantasies. And he finally just couldn't take it anymore. And he just opened up to this elderly monk who was there and said, "Look, this is what's going on in my imagination. These are my struggles, my battles." And this elderly monk was like, aghast, like, the very fact that you're struggling with that is a sign that you are not cut out for the monastic life, this whole state of life. You just need to get out of here. And so from that, the younger man was just totally discouraged. Like, okay, that's it. He's the wise one. I'm not cut out for this stuff. And he just started walking towards Alexandria, which is basically like walking to the red light district in Amsterdam nowadays, of just like, okay, I'm going to go throw the towel in. On his way to this flesh pot of temptation, of just indulging in it, he ran into another old monk named Apollos. And Apollos could tell he was really weighed down by something. And he got the young monk to open up to him. And the older monk said, no. He said, "No, this is just part of the battle. Come with me. We're going back." And they went back to the monastery, and this old monk knelt outside of the hermitage of this, prudish puritanical monk, and he just prayed. He said, "God, send your Holy Spirit to this foolish, stupid old monk and send him." This old monk prayed that God would send the other monk the temptations that the younger one was going through, so that he could learn from experience what he has not learned through being in the desert for 70 years. And he said immediately the older monk came like running out of his room, just like totally traumatized, to go run over to Alexandria himself to give up. And what you learn from this is that holiness is not about being numb to the beauties that God has created. It's just learning to live a full-blooded chastity of like, yes, I recognize the beauty of human sexuality. The bishop even mentioned that when he was a younger priest, he was over in Rome, and an older priest came in the house just glowing and just like delighted. And the older priest said, "Wow," he said, "I just met in the street one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen." And he just walked by her and he said, "When I saw her, I just wanted to applaud." And he didn't applaud because that'd be a little bit awkward, but he just saw beauty and he was delighted by it. And he just went on with his day. And it's such a healthy integration of sexual desire, instead of be like, "Ooh, what is that? Why can't I have that?" Like getting into this neurotic, shameful, repressive no, he was delighted. He wanted to applaud because she was so beautiful. And he carried that delight with him. And so to me, this is the human approach that we've got to take to this thing, not this white-knuckled, shame, ridden isolation. No. Let's be honest. These are real desires. God gave us our bodies, and if we turn our hearts back to him, he can show us how to use them.
True. So this is a 33 days program. What's on day 34?
Oh, day 34 is okay. Now I've got all these weapons. Okay. Now some days I'm going to need pull out the sword. Some days I'm going to need the battle axe. Some days I'm going to need a little dagger. And the idea is that there isn't one solution to all the problems. For someone, it might be predominantly spiritual. There could be, some affliction going on there, some oppression. You might need some deliverance prayer work done. You need to take your interior life of prayer more seriously. You need to get over to confession and go regularly to that. For other people, it'd be like, no, I'm already doing my interior life stuff, but it's not budging. It's like the addiction's not going away. Okay. Is there some counseling that's needed? Is there some healing that needs to happen on a psychological level? And so the reason we give them such an assortment of weapons is because this is not like a cookie cutter, one size fits all solution to this problem. And you've got to customize it to like, okay, what is really the core issue here? And to be able to come to God in sincerity and prayer and talk to him about this stuff, like he's sitting before you, that he's not like astonished that you're having these thoughts like, oh my goodness, you thought what? I can't believe you would think that, as if he doesn't already know what we're thinking. Like to be able to come to him with that authenticity and meet him in that. Like, look, God, I'm really craving this right now. And I keep thinking about that. And then he could say, okay, well, who is that person? Like, let's pray for her right now. Like, let's respond to the beauty of her created body with love. Let's pray a decade of the rosary for that woman. You're having those flashbacks. Okay. Don't just say no, no, no. Let's say yes to loving her. Okay. Now, how would you love this woman in your fantasy? What you could do is you could pray a decade of the rosary. You could fast for her. You could offer up your next mass for her. And so now you're responding to the beauty of body with love instead of lust.
Well, I'm already coming to my last question. Is there anything else you want to tell the readers before they start the program?
Just don't do it alone. That's the biggest thing. Like that's the temptation of just like, I got this. I'll figure it out on my own. Just Lone Ranger. Don't even try it. You know how many other guys are struggling with this that would probably appreciate if someone said, hey, we got this program. You want to do it with me? Hey, why don't we make an announcement at the end of Mass of any guys who want to do this together? We're meeting at Tuesday mornings at 6 a.m. or Wednesday at 7 o'clock at night. Get a bunch of guys to do with you, not just one. If you can get 20 or 30, I know a college group of more than 100 guys that are doing it at a university together in the States. But you just need one guy to be able to say, like, look, am I the only one here wrestling with this? No, me too, me too, me too. Okay, let's be a band of brothers and let's fight this thing together. Kind of makes me think of there's a early church martyrs called the 40 Martyrs of Sebast. They were Roman legionary soldiers, and the way that they were martyred, because they wouldn't burn incense to the pagan god, is the Roman governor had them strip naked and stand on the ice on a lake all night long until they were dead. Now, if they were each on their own little pond, half of them probably would have given up. But because they had the fellowship of that 40, they huddled and they prayed together through the night. And you could imagine the incense, like their breath rising up like their own incense to the true God. And, eventually they all died, and the emperor has long been forgotten, but they're now honored in icons throughout all of Eastern Christianity. But, again, I return to the thought, if they were all on their own, how many would have won that crown? But because they had that band of 40, they persevered through that dark, cold night.
Yeah, wow. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time again. It's really great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you did to make the whole program available there in Germany. I think it's fantastic. As a German myself, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really hope that this book will be such a huge blessing for so many men. And yeah, well, God bless you and your family as well, and your ministry, of course.
Thank you.